Spider punk, huh? Punk isn't necessarily anarchist though. There's a lot of anarchist punk though. Yeah, that is true. Um, I've always had a bit of criticism of like anarchist punkism in a way. I think it's not bad to be punk. It's not bad to be a punk anarchist. How do I say this? Yeah, London punk does have anarchist tendencies. I know some people who were introduced to anarchism through the punk movement. The professor I was talking about last stream, Francis Dupédery, was introduced to anarchism through the punk movement. And halitosis saying, well, pretty much phrasing my concern, maybe not my criticism, but my concern with the punk and anarchism overlap. Halitosis says, I doubt that that spider punk had a material analysis, but the aesthetics were fun. And that's my concern with the overlap of punk and anarchism. It's that punk and its culture is very reliant on its aesthetics and on its anti-conformity. And I feel like anarchism has this issue, not only in terms of its public presentation, but in our understanding of it, that it's breaking everything and setting fire to everything and being very angry and being against culture because we hate culture, and being against everything because we hate everything. And it's about provoking for the sake of provoking, and it's all about being contrarian for the sake of contradicting everything, which to me is not anarchism. It's far from being what anarchism is. To me, anarchism is a philosophy that is liberating, not only in its end goals, but also in the process of achieving that end goal. It's about, it's less of a current that's against than a current that's for. There's a lot of criticism that comes from anarchism, but there's a lot of positive also that comes from it, right? I think it's more about building than destroying, though, as there's a very famous Bakunin quote that says, the urge to destroy is a creative urge. But I believe that there's more creativity than destruction in anarchism. At least that's my conception of it. Yes, it is about rejecting the current social organization structures and hierarchies. But I think that beyond opposing those, there's also creating parallel structures and decentralized, autonomous, egalitarian structures, right? And as Temer says, punkism is pretty nihilist. This might turn off socially minded anarchists. Yeah, that I think that's why it turns me off personally. The whole aesthetics and personal style or lifestyle to me is very individualistic, which is fine, right? I'm not against individualism, but it just sounds a lot like, I don't know, like personal rebellion instead of social rebellion, if that makes sense. Sneaky Revenant says, there are bands that sort of use the public image of anarchy to be edgy, but there's also real anarchists that know theory and stuff. Yeah, for sure. That's why I'm more concerned than actually criticizing it. Because I do know for a fact that many people who are punk are actually anarchists. And a lot of people who are anarchists were introduced to it through the punk subculture. So I'm not totally against it. I'm just skeptical. I've never read on lifestyle anarchism, which is something I'd like to read on. I don't know if it actually is part of what I'm saying. If it's, yeah, I think lifestyle anarchism is exactly what I'm trying to, is kind of associating to punkism, though it's not necessarily the case, but I feel like there might be an overlap here. Lifestylism, anarchists who prioritize cultural and identity protest over class struggle politics, associated with Murray Bookchin's 1995 essay in pejorative reference to anarcho-primitivists, post-structural anarchists, and individualists/egoists. Actually looked up his 1995 essay, Lifestyle, on lifestyle anarchism, to see if he talks about punk. But he doesn't. I controlled F punk, and there's only spunk, but it's not there. And I just want to read Anarchism as Chaos to see, just to see. We're just peeking, all right? Yeah, Sneaky Revenant says there's definitely a lot of punks like that. There are also punks that are pretty serious about mutual aid. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I don't want to understate the fact that a lot of punks are into mutual aid, and perhaps a lot of punks are punks because of the aesthetic, and then through the culture and through the communities they join, then they become more about mutual aid and more about the politics of it. There you go. Sneaky Revenant says I got into anarchism because I listened to punk. There you go. Whatever Brown's own preferences may be, her book both reflects and provides the premises for the shift among Euro-American anarchists away from social anarchism and towards individualist or lifestyle anarchism. Indeed, lifestyle anarchism today is finding its principal expression in spray can graffiti, postmodern nihilism. Jordan Peterson hates postmodern nihilism. Anti-rationalism, neo-primitivism, anti-technologism, neo-situationist cultural terrorism, mysticism, and a practice of staging Foucauldian personal insurrections. These trendy posturings, nearly all of which follow current yuppie fashions, are individualistic in the most important sense that they are antithetical to the development of serious organizations, a radical politics, a committed social movement, theoretical coherence, and programmatic relevance. More oriented toward achieving one's own self-realization than achieving basic social change, this trend among lifestyle anarchists is particularly noxious in that it's turning inward, as Katinka Matson called it, claims to be a politics, albeit one that resembles R.D. Laing's politics of experience. The black flag, which revolutionary social anarchists raised in insurrectionary struggles in Ukraine and Spain, now becomes a fashionable sarong for the delectation of chic petit bourgeois. That sums up pretty much my concern or my skepticism towards punk. I don't know why we got into it. Of course, I like to see like-minded people, but I like to see people who say, yeah, I'm an anarchist, and who don't look like anarchists. To me, that's really, 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 really good. Because that means they're not making it about their individual style or individual personality. It's really about ideas. It's fine if you look like an anarchist. And I guess looking like an anarchist depends on cultural context as well. But I really like, it happened a couple of times where I meet someone completely randomly and they're like, oh yeah, like I'm also an anarchist actually. I'm like, I've had people say, oh, I'm actually an anarchist. I'm like, oh really? How come? And they're like, oh, well, I very often didn't do what people told me to do, which is like, all right, that you're not an anarchist. I'm sorry. But when people say, hey, I'm an anarchist, I'm like, oh yeah, like, oh, how, like, why are you an anarchist? And they're like, oh, I read Kropotkin and I really, really identify to these ideas, and I think it's really good. And I think that you're not an anarchist only because you read Kropotkin, but because as you identify to its values and you think it's coherent. And I think that makes more sense than saying either, oh yeah, I've often didn't do what people told me to do, or oh yeah, because I'm against, I don't like the way the world is. Yeah, WGTA says, people treating anarchism as a vibe sounds like a Shay or Che merge situation. Part of me thinks like it's not necessarily there can be like positives to it, right? And it's like normalizing a bit like a socialist icon. It has its own issues as well, though, right? It's like rainbow capitalism. It has its own issues, but it's also normalizing So I feel like it's not too bad, right? There's definitely good parts of it. For sure, like punk is not normalizing anarchism, because if anything, punk is trying to defy what's normal. So maybe the equivalency is not right here, but it does have some negative repercussions for sure. I think it definitely does, but I do think that the positive outweighs the negative. I think, for example, the Budweiser controversy just made conservatives look kind of fragile. Imagine we lived in a world where companies made like some anti-LGBT, anti-queer month, and they would, every month of, I don't know, November, they had a flag that was anti-queer to symbolize how queerness is degenerate, right? We'd say that companies who are pushing this anti-queer labeling, right, they're doing it for the money. It doesn't, like, maybe they don't really give a fuck about queer people, right? If they exist, they don't care. But in that alternate universe, they're signaling that they're against queer people, because most people are against queer people. It's the conservative utopia, and in that utopia, queer people will say, "Hey, that's really harmful that you're anti-queer. You're signaling anti-queer like ideas through your branding." I don't think any queer people would say, "Hey, this is actually fine. It's not changing anything. It's not like corporations care if we actually exist or not. They're just doing it to get more money, right?" But when we do that comparison, like, I think it does change. It does change some things, right? Most normies will be like, "Oh yeah, I guess the world is changing. There's a lot of bigots out there. I'm certainly not one of them. I'll buy the LGBT beer, or the trans beer, or whatever. I don't care." But it's definitely contributing to the discourse, I believe. A bunch of corporations who hopped off and pandered to the right are now getting canceled by the right for not being right-wing enough. But yeah, the thing is, by pandering to the right, very often the right is going to be, especially if they're advocating for branding changes in a company, they have to be somewhat kind of extreme or radical, right? They got to care enough about the queer situation for them to actually pressure a company to be more to the right. And the thing is, you can never fully satisfy these people. I feel like no matter what, companies will always have to be somewhat center-ish, because their whole goal is to appeal to the broader group of to the most people as possible. Some companies will try to create their own niche, either on the right or the left, and you might get some more and more like some products and some market competition in capitalism, where before people competed on the price, before people competed on the quality of the product, but now we're going to compete on the ideas of the company who sells the thing. Perhaps that's going to be the next market to compete within, right? It's through ideological presence, I guess.